We chose to tell a little-known story about one of the most important events in American history, which was the fight to pass the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. And to give that complicated story its due and to explore it in as much detail as we felt it deserved, we counted on the audiences for Lincoln to supply the now universal understanding that slavery was horrific, the same way we count on the audience's awareness of the horrors of the Civil War itself, which visually occupies only a very small portion of our film. Well, we focused only on the last 4 months of Lincoln's life because we wanted to show Lincoln accomplishing something great, something really monumental, and that was abolishing slavery and ending the Civil War. However, we also wanted to show that he was a man, not a monument, and that our best hope of understanding and doing justice to this immensely complicated person was to depict him beginning and then conducting and then concluding a very, very complex action, which was the fight to pass the 13th Amendment on the floor of the House of Representatives. We hoped to locate an event that also hadn't been previously dramatized, but had very, very significant and very, very legitimately high stakes. And we also wanted to be able to include Lincoln's family dynamic, but again, only at the moments in which they actually collided with the public events that this whole story is about. Well, as to whether Lincoln was the greatest president we've ever, had in this country, Lincoln certainly guided our country through its worst crisis in its entire history, and more than any other single person, he helped the United States to survive. And we feel that in doing this, he helped the idea of democracy as a viable political system to survive. And more than any other single person, Lincoln helped end slavery. Yes, I think it could be a challenge for 2012 audiences to go back into the 19th century world in which the Democratic Party is conservative and the Republican Party is liberal and progressive. But that was actually the case in that part of the 19th century. And the pathways that both of these parties took to the present day, in which they basically traded political places, could be the subject of lots of movies and stories. It was very important for all of us making this film to avoid being cynical, to avoid cynicism. And I think it was just as important for all of us making the film to avoid hero worship, because I think you can admire someone immensely, as we admire Lincoln, without necessarily worshiping him. Yeah, there's many, many feature-length stories that could have been told and found on very nearly every page of Doris Kearns Goodwin's 800-page team of rivals. But with Doris's blessing and her full participation throughout the whole process, we decided to focus on one individual story, which was the ending of the war, the conclusion of the war, and the fight to abolish slavery through constitutional amendment. And we feel this film version of Lincoln is very true to the spirit of Doris's masterpiece. Well, I was determined to make a movie about a working president, not a posing president. Abraham Lincoln was a statesman, a highly effective military leader. He was a father, a husband, and everybody believes he was one of our country's greatest writers. And I hope our film shows how really multifaceted he was. But we basically concentrated our story on Lincoln's political skills. He was intuitively brilliant. He always took the broad view, but he never lost his own ideals, and he could almost see into the future, but he never forgot where he came from or where the country came from. And all of this was accomplished while looking always, continuously, deeply inside himself. When I got into the screenplay, it was just one of the most brilliant things I had ever read. But it was sprawling, and it was epic, and it was 9 hours long. And it was just impractical as a motion picture. Tony and I had determined to tell the story in motion picture theaters, not on television, at least in its first round. So I thought that the most compelling thing that Tony had written in the entire 550-page document was a 70-page stretch of the fight to pass the 13th Amendment on the floor of the House of Representatives. It had already passed in the Senate, but they, of course, needed the house.